Good morning. In college, my friend introduced me to a philosopher named Alan Watts. I was instantly hooked, and his teachings have continued to inspire me more than a decade later. I'd like to share a quote with you that I've always found very meaningful. To have faith is to trust yourself to the water. When you swim, you don't grab a hold of the water, because if you do, you will sink and drown. Instead, you relax and float. This morning, I invite you to bring that kind of trust into this space, not the kind that tries to fix or control us, but the kind that lets you relax, breathe, and trust what's already moving through you. Let this hour be a place where you don't have to hold it all together. Let it be enough to simply be here. Before we settle into my reflection this morning, I want to invite you to a quieter, maybe less stretchy moment of meditation. Today, we are going to be talking about temples. Now, I'd like to invite you to close your eyes if you feel comfortable. Take a big breath in and a big breath out. And imagine if you were to build yourself a temple. If you can picture it, what does it look like? Is it made out of wood, stone, or something else? Are there bright colors, or is it more calm and neutral? What kind of entrance does it have? Is there a water feature? What's the landscape surrounding it? Maybe mountains, forest, fields, sand. Is there maybe a child crying in the background of your temple? Imagine walking inside. Doors open, light coming in, space where you and your whole self are gently held inside. How does your body feel in this sacred space that belongs to only you? Let that image hold you for just a moment. Whether you're sitting here in front of me or listening online, let that image and feel of the temple take shape for you. Let's listen to a little bit of instrumental music for a few seconds while you create that in your mind. James, could you play something? Thanks. I don't know about you, but if I'm trying to picture something, think, listen, maybe absorb the baby crying sound, my brain just stops. So thank you for taking that moment with me. We often hear the phrase, "My body is a temple," as a call to keep it pure and untouched. But what kind of temple are we talking about? A locked fortress? A temple where onlookers might just not believe in the tradition, but stop to admire the art and beauty. And if our bodies are temples, does that mean that they're meant to be admired, protected, or lived in? Because you would not believe how many people have looked at my tattoos, which if you can't see are all over my body, and said, "Oh, well, my body is a temple, so I don't get any." Which is funny to me, because so is mine. And in my temple, we paint the walls. We add our stories. We ink our so-called prayers into our skin. And we make space for the things that we care about, sometimes permanently. Real temples, I found, are not perfect. They're layered, sometimes messy, and they're often places where people go to escape. They go to bring life in. So maybe our job isn't to keep the temple pristine. Maybe our job is to open it up. Temples, in ancient sense, are usually religious buildings. Across many traditions, they are not just sacred, they are relational. In Hinduism, temples are vibrant and public, full of sound and offerings of art. In Buddhism, they are places of both deep silence and collective practice. In Judaism, the synagogue or temple is not only a place of worship, but of remembrance, questioning, and study. People bring their full selves there: grief, celebration, confusion, community, and the space holds it all. I'm not talking about temples within a religious context, or I am talking about temples within a religious context here, but as we move into this general understanding of a temple, we can start by seeing that in these examples, what makes them sacred isn't perfection, it's presence. It's the willingness to let life enter into the space. What if we could do that with our lives? I got one of my tattoos during a trip to London on what ended up being one of the most frustrating, humbling, and weirdly sacred days of my life. I was visiting my best friend who was in grad school there, and I decided on a whim one morning, late morning, to take a solo train ride across the country to see the White Cliffs of Dover, as you can see here. You know that song, The White Cliffs of Dover. Yeah, I see some nods. It was one of my dad's favorites, so much so that we actually played it at his funeral. I still haven't listened to it since that day. So it felt meaningful for me to take the trip, almost like a pilgrimage. I woke up on the second to last day, I looked it up, I booked a round-trip ticket to go see him, and I jumped on the train. I thought I would figure out the rest later. I took the hour-and-a-half train ride, got off in a town I'd never been to, navigated using a printed map that I'd scribbled on, walked up to a tourist office just to read a handwritten sign that was taped to the door that said, "No boat rides to the cliffs today." Fog, choppy water, closed. I was disappointed, but I picked up my hopes and I decided I would find a coffee shop and regroup. Maybe I could walk to the cliffs. I walked around the corner and saw an open cafe, but as I opened the door, I reached in my purse to find my wallet, which was a common habit for me, but it wasn't there. I kept fumbling, sure that was hiding somewhere around the various items I probably didn't need to have in my purse that day. Nothing. Panic started to set in a little bit, but I knew I'd figure it out. I always did. I didn't have a data plan for my cell phone, so I didn't have service, and I couldn't get a hold of my friend back in London. But I wasn't worried at that point, because as I said, I had always figured it out. So I turned around and made my way back to the bus station using that printed map that is now crumbled in my hands. I explained very calmly to the clerk what had happened, and they just shrugged. "Sorry, miss, we can't do anything. You need a ticket to get back to London." Okay, well now I just need some Wi-Fi so that I can get some cell service, contact my friend back in London, and have her get me a ticket. Easy. Except that that cafe that I'd walked back to was closed. And they were the only place in town with public Wi-Fi. For the first time in all of my travels, across continents, alone, with strangers I had just met, not speaking the language most often, I felt stuck. Like, really stuck. I sat on a bench for an hour, completely unsure of what to do next. Eventually, a kind stranger saw me sitting there. Maybe I was bawling my eyes out. and they offered that I could use their phone to contact my friend back in London. I called her, barely able to say words, and she booked an online ticket for me to get back. I was able to give the phone to the clerk who got the number. This was before you could just have an app on your phone and scan a QR code or a barcode and get on the train. They read the order number and they said, okay, you can go. But at that point, I was completely defeated. On this trip to England, I happened to be reading this book, The Wisdom of Insecurity by Alan Watts. That's the philosopher I mentioned earlier. On that train ride, I was fighting back tears so hard that I probably just read that same page maybe 13 times. I was pretending I was reading so that onlookers wouldn't think that I was secretly crying, but I was really holding back tears as much as I could and feeling like I had completely failed that day. Even though not a single other word soaked in from that page, I remember seeing this quote that he used by St. Augustine, saying, "Love and do what you will." I didn't pay attention to it at the time. I just wanted to get back to the city. After what felt like a 10-hour train ride, we arrived at the station downtown, and as I got off the train, the first face I saw was my best friend, who was standing there with a Dr. Pepper, a block of cheese, which is my favorite thing in the whole world, and a bag of chips. I burst into tears, couldn't hold them back any longer, and fell into a much-needed hug. The next day, I reread that chapter that I attempted to read on the train, and I really saw that St. Augustine quote, "Love and do what you will." I couldn't explain it at the moment, but it struck me. I looked up a tattoo shop within walking distance that had good reviews, key, grabbed my friend, and headed straight there. I now have this quote tattooed on the side of my knee. None of these moments were planned. It wasn't poetic at the time at all. But that's when I began to understand what it means to stop controlling the world around me and still be held in it. That's when I started to see my body and my life as a temple that lets everything in that life may bring just pass on through. In that book, Alan Watts talks a lot about illusion, particularly the illusion of separation. We often think about our discomfort that it comes from the outside. Other people, the news, grief, injustice, politics, physical pain even. But what if what bothers us out there is really something that we're avoiding in here? The more we resist something, the more it clings to us. What we push away doesn't disappear, it just waits for us. So instead of asking, why is this happening to me, which is what I kept asking on that bench that day, maybe I should ask, what is this trying to show me? Grief, anger, discomfort, these aren't enemies that are at the gates of our temple. They're pilgrims trying to come in and float through it. When we open our temples to discomfort, something beautiful happens. We create. Creativity isn't just a painting or a writing. It's how we adapt in the world, how we process, how we respond to life. And our ancestors used creativity to survive, to resist, to love, to build. Every single recipe, ritual, story, song, lesson, those are all creativity. In UU language, we have JETPIG values: justice, equity, transformation, pluralism, interdependence, generosity. Each one is an act of creative living. Each one asks us to take what is and go out into the world and make something better. So maybe you are a temple. Not a sealed monument or a fortress, even though sometimes we would like to be. We might not be a perfect structure, but instead we are a living, breathing space that holds contradiction, that changes with the seasons and allows life to move through it. Just like, I know it's kind of small, but can everyone see the water that's flowing through the temple? Alan Watts said, "You are not a drop in the ocean. You are an ocean in a drop." That means everything that's moving outside of you and orbiting around you in the world is already inside of you. And that everything you need is already part of who you are. What would change if you stopped treating anxiety, anger, pain, or grief as something you're battling, something that's outside of you? What if they weren't intruders? What if we let them come in? What if they sat for a while? May we surrender to the creative force moving through all of us. May we stop resisting the pain that's here to show us something. May we let go, not to fall, but to flow. Take a breath. Imagine yourself as a temple, doors open, light coming in, space held gently inside.